Welcome to RBERNing Questions, a professional learning podcast where we answer your most compelling questions about teaching, serving, and supporting multilingual learners. I'm your host, Jasmine Coaxum, and through our talks, I look forward to bringing the methods, philosophies, and stories behind teaching multilingual learners to light. Let's get into the show. Dr. Luciana de Oliveira is Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Professor in the School of Education at Virginia Commonwealth University. Currently, Dr. de Oliveira's research examines scaffolding in elementary classrooms. She has authored or edited 30 books and has over 200 publications in various outlets. She has over 30 years of teaching experience in the field of TESOL, and Dr. de Oliveira was the first Latina to ever serve as president of TESOL from 2018 to 2019. She was also a member of TESOL's board of directors from 2013 to 2016. So her research focuses on issues related to teaching multilingual learners at the K-12 level, including the role of language in learning academic content. She also strongly advocates for social justice, and we're excited to have her as a guest today on RBERNing Questions to speak with her about the knowledge she's sharing in her recently published book, Supporting Multilingual Learners' Academic Language Development, a language-based approach to content instruction. Dr. de Oliveira, it's a pleasure to have you on our show today, and we're really excited to hear all about the juicy nuggets of knowledge that you're bringing to educators in your recently published book, Supporting Multilingual Learners' Academic Language Development, a language-based approach to content instruction. Now, the audience has already heard about your extensive and very accomplished background in this field. But let's go ahead and start with the question of what inspired you to enter the field of TESOL from the beginning?
From the beginning. Oh, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Yasmin, for having me as part of this. It's wonderful to be able to, continue to speak to TESOL educators and others listening to your podcast. So just a little bit of background, what inspired me to enter the TESOL field. I would say that ever since I was a little girl growing up in Brazil, I've always wanted to be an English teacher.
Wow.
And I was about 7 years old when I started to teach my dolls and my stuffed animals and all of that in my hometown in Brazil. And I just really, going from just experiences in the classroom with English teachers. I just was so interested in language and language development from when I was a child. So that really was the beginning. I had some wonderful English teachers in Brazil growing up. And so they really inspired me, to go into the field. And so I started teaching actually pretty young. At age 18, I taught at a private language school in Brazil. I taught children, teenagers, and adults at the same time that I was attending college for languages. So I'm licensed in both English and Portuguese. So I'm both an English and a Portuguese language teacher. And so that experience was really amazing. I did that for 4 years before coming to the US. At age 21. So, it really is about the experiences that I had in Brazil as an English language learner, and also inspiration from teachers, and also my own experiences as an English, as a foreign language teacher in Brazil, that really kind of prompted me into going into this field.
Wow, I love this. I really love hearing people's beginner stories, and because it's not often that you hear someone who, is in the field and that they initially had such a strong passion for teaching so early on, right? So a lot of people, maybe they develop it a little bit later, but I just have the best image now of you teaching your dolls.
Yes.
That is the best. That's really
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people's experiences within classrooms do, end up shaping what they want to go into and how they see themselves career wise. So since you mentioned that, is there one particular instance that you have in mind where something that really, really inspired you in terms of what a teacher did or said in the classroom as you were learning language, et cetera, that really jumped out at you and kind of enforced this idea that you really want to go into this field?
Yeah, I think that there was one point in time that I was thinking about going into something else, actually into dentistry.
Wow.
Believe it or not, I think family pressure. At that time, this was in the 90s in Brazil. A lot of teachers were. It was a very demanding profession, and also teachers not making a lot of money. And so for both family and also some of my own teachers in high school discouraging me to go into teaching, I started to feel like, oh, maybe I should do something else, maybe go for a major in psychology or dentistry. My hometown in Brazil has a really strong dental school. And so because of, influences like that, I started to think about, going, into another field. But as I was mentioning, I was actually a student at the language school that I ended up teaching at later on. And the two teachers there were the ones, and I'm going to get a little emotional because every time I tell this story, I get emotional, because I'm thinking of the role of mentors, for
Mm,
us
mm,
as students. And if you are in high school, like, thinking about all these things. And in Brazil, you have to decide pretty early on, like your field, what you want to do.
mm.
So it's a little bit of a complex process. I don't want to go into that, but I remember very clearly when these two teachers who taught at this English language school, they basically got me into this back room, the back classroom, and told me, you have to be an English teacher. Don't listen to others and what they want to influence you, how they want to be. You have all the skills and the knowledge and the passion to really be an English teacher, and you're going to be successful. Don't go by what they're telling you. Really, you have to know by now how passionate you are about the teaching and learning of English, and we see a bright future for you. And that was really a pivotal moment
Mm,
in
mm.
my career, because I would probably be in a very different situation right now had I not been influenced
Mhm.
by these two amazing English teachers that
Yes.
I had. And it shows too, I think, the role of mentoring for people, that are being influenced by family, by
Mm,
others, to go into fields that perhaps are seen as more acceptable, or better in some ways, that will be better paid and things like that. But
right.
it's so important to have those role models and those mentors that can guide you and really think about you as an individual, what your skills are, and what you can contribute to this amazing field, which is TESOL. So that was really a pivotal moment
Wow.
in my
Yes.
life, because I knew that I wanted to be an English teacher again when I was 7 years old. But then, because of these other influences, I started to change my mind. The only people in my family really that supported me were the teachers in my family. So
Mm.
um, that was a really incredible moment and kind of experience that really literally changed my life later on.
Well, Luciana, I really appreciate you just your vulnerability, being able to kind of express that here. And I understand, of course, why, you got emotional, or why one would get emotional, because a lot of times that's really all it takes, right? Is just to have somebody see you and believe in you, right? And to kind of push your talents. And that's what I think a lot of our L's and just students in general really need, right? To really help them to feel as though they can develop and they can grow in whatever capacity it is that they are actually leaning towards or passionate about. Okay, so now I want to get really into your newly published book. And, first I'm just going to read a bit of its description. Okay, so I know that so it provides elementary school teachers with everything they need to know to successfully teach grade level content to multilingual learners. Chapters are organized by subject, addressing the specific language demands of teaching English language arts, social studies, mathematics, and science. Each chapter features examples of implementation in grades K through 5, practical strategies, and a wealth of tables, figures, and other resources. Now, this book really sounds like an absolute must have for any teacher who has multilingual learners in their classrooms, which, if we face it, it's pretty much almost every teacher in the US at this point. So, um, your book is about, a teacher education model called LACI, or as is said in the title, language-based approach to content instruction. So can you just kind of take us on a little bit of a deep dive of this model and tell us really what prompted your focus on content instruction as opposed to maybe language instruction?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's wonderful to be able to talk about the book that was just published a couple months ago, so it's pretty brand new.
Yes.
So as you mentioned, and also as I talk about in in the book, LACI is an integrated content and language teacher education model. It revolves around what I call 6 C's of support for scaffolding instruction for multilingual learners. The 6 C's are connection, culture, code breaking, challenge, community and collaboration, and classroom interactions. And so, the book goes into the 6 C's and provides lots of examples of how elementary school teachers have implemented LACI in the classroom with a focus on the 6 C's of support for scaffolding. And I think because of my work as a teacher educator with general education teachers who have a lot of multilingual learners in their classrooms, I focused on preparing them to plan instruction with the 6 C's in mind, and to support multilingual learners' content and language development, because in my view, language and content are learned simultaneously. And so that's why, my work has really focused on helping general education teachers plan instruction and work with multilingual learners in their classrooms, because as you mentioned, pretty much every teacher today needs to be prepared to work with multilingual learners. It's not just the job of your English as a second language teacher or your bilingual teacher to support multilingual learners. And though, of course, ESL specialists and bilingual specialists have critical roles in working with our multilingual population, every teacher needs to develop their knowledge base for working with the students. And so that's primarily why I focused LACI on, primarily thinking about general education teachers and content instruction.
Right. Okay. So now on the topic of those 6 C's of support for scaffolding, I really wanted to highlight 2 of them today. And so one of them is challenge, right? Which puts, I'm just kind of going by what was mentioned in an article that you wrote in the STARS section of the Journal of English Learner Education. And also this was the December 2021 version of this, and it was titled Planning for Instruction Using a Language-Based Approach to Content Instruction for Multilingual Learners, right? So actually this article also has a planning guide that presents each C of support along with questions, examples, and a column for teachers to plan how they would address the 6 C's of support, and, basically structure content areas for multilingual learners. So, and I'm assuming maybe the same guide is in the book, maybe just a little bit more of an updated version.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. All right, great. So, basically, I wanted to focus on the first one of the C's I wanted to focus on was challenge, because it puts a focus on high challenge and high support as high academic standards and content are maintained for multilingual learners. So this to me is one of the most important C's, as oftentimes multilingual learners are basically treated as subpar academically due to the language barriers. So, one of the things that you also said in this STARS article is that, one of the main ideas developed in this approach is access to a disciplinary language, or the language developed in different content areas, not by simplifying content, but by enabling multilingual learners to manipulate language as it is written, so without simplification. So I just wanted to kind of highlight this one, C of challenge, because I think this is very important. And the second one I want to highlight, which I do have a question coming up for you about, is code breaking, right? So in this sea of support, the article says that teachers address academic and disciplinary literacies to break the codes, right, of content learning, which, as you said, I think it's typically viewed as having content and language instruction as separate entities, when really this should be kind of brought together. So this C focuses on language from 3 angles, from what I understand, right? Presenting ideas, enacting a relationship with the reader or listener, and constructing a cohesive message. So for our audience, I'm wondering if you can kind of give us a concrete example of how this particular see would be implemented in a lesson, this code breaking?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. I wanted to also mention with the challenge, with the C of challenge, this is a C that I included in LACI. It has been shown in the literature for culturally and linguistically diverse students, that as you mentioned too, that you know, a lot of things have been simplified for our multilingual learners. And so what the C of challenge really does is to highlight that we need high challenge and high support classrooms. And I go into a lot more detail in the LACI book. But this is also something that I have been writing about for a long time. Pretty much all my research is really about making grade level content accessible, in the sense that you're providing students with access to what we call the language of schooling, right? To academic language as it's written, without simplification. And this I would say has been a little bit controversial in the TESOL field, because we have been taught as ESOL professionals that students need simplified texts. And this really goes against that notion that students need simplified texts. What they really need is support, and also so high support, and you know, really a focus on grade level texts. And it could be a paragraph or two, some sentences that are pulled out from the actual text, without simplification. Because if we are giving students simplified texts all the time, especially those that are at levels like 3 and above of English language proficiency, if you think of like a 6-point scale, they will really need to have access to this language in order to perform in assessments, in order to read with comprehension. And it's just a really, really important C, the C of challenge. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that. The way to provide that access to the language of schooling is through the C of code breaking. So the C of code breaking highlights academic literacy, disciplinary language. So, you know, sometimes when I talk about disciplinary language or disciplinary literacy, it's new information for the teachers that I work with. And it really is something that we need to be thinking about and really focusing on as both content and language teachers. And code breaking, I would say, is a special C for those of you who are ESL and bilingual specialists, as well as those that are content teachers and are teaching all the content areas, or, you know, as in the case of elementary school, or an individual content area, as in the case of secondary school. So the C of code breaking takes us into looking at what is used in texts in terms of verbal resources, visual resources, multimodal means of presenting content, for example. So teachers, there are specific things that teachers can look at with students in looking at presenting content. So questions such as, what is the text or image about? What are the key concepts developed in the text or image? So there are things in the language that we can analyze, that we can look at specifically with students for them to understand this piece of presenting content. For enacting a relationship with the reader, We are looking at the nature of the interaction. Is it formal, more informal, close, distant? Are there attitudes being mentioned in the text? What kind of judgment is being referred to? So we are answering two main questions. What is the author's perspective? So you can look at evaluative meanings. You can look at mood. So is are the sentences in declarative mood, interrogative, etc.? And how does the author of the text or image interact with the reader or viewer? Are there words such as, you need to look at this, blah, blah, blah. So how are they interacting with the reader or viewer in that sense? So enacting a relationship with the reader is a really important part of code breaking because it allows us to look at perspective. And then lastly, constructing a cohesive message. So for that, we're looking at organization of information, including connections between sentences and paragraphs. Oftentimes, teachers love to work with reference devices. How are words repeated, in the text and things like that. So we answer two main questions. How is the text image organized? And how does the text image construct a cohesive message? So there are several things in the language also that we can pay attention to answer those two questions. As I mentioned, like reference devices are a good focus. How sentences are built from sentence to sentence and from paragraph to paragraph. And so all of these pieces, so presenting content, enacting a relationship, and constructing a cohesive message are really critical components of code breaking. And I go into a lot more detail with lots of examples in the book, but I hope that that gives at least a general idea about, the C of code breaking.
Yes, thank you so much. It was really a very comprehensive, I think, and thorough example for people to kind of, chew on, think about in terms of how they could implement this. So, and I like that, when you were talking about this, you mentioned multimodal means of presenting content. So in your conversation with the JOLT president, this was back in 2021 when you were a plenary speaker for the JOLT conference. So that's, it's the Japan Association of Language Teachers, I believe. And so during that conversation with the president, you said that literacy doesn't just involve reading, it involves multimodal ways of meaning making. So can you provide some specific examples of how teachers can implement literacy in multimodal ways? Maybe like a glimpse of one that's mentioned in your book?
Yes, so thank you for that question. That's a great question. Yeah, so a lot of times when people think about literacy, the first thing that comes to their mind is reading.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, and you also mentioned, literacy is much more than reading, and it involves, of course, writing and multimodal ways of meaning making. So in the LACI book, I have a few examples, but I actually wanted to mention another book that just came out a few months ago, actually a few months before the LACI book, that is published by Cambridge University Press as part of the Elements in Language Teaching series. And this book is entitled Teaching Young Multilingual Learners, Key Issues and New Insights, which I co-authored with Dr. Lauren Jones from the University of Maryland, College Park. She's my former doctoral student from the University of Miami, where I was there. And in it, we describe several culturally sustaining teaching practices for young multilingual learners that have been shown to be very effective in the classroom. And one of these practices is what we call quote, multimodal instruction creates message abundance that provides challenging content, not simplified instruction, end quote. And so this culturally sustaining teaching practice, we go in more detail in that book. It's a short little book. It's almost like an article. And we, again, it connects back to the sea of challenge here that we were just talking about. And what multimodal instruction does is that it affords multilingual learners the opportunity to more fully participate in the classroom. And activities that are multimodal are especially important for our students as they are tasked with learning both content and language simultaneously. Teachers can no longer reduce learning to paper-based resources. So by utilizing multiple modes, students can use their strengths, experiences, and knowledge. Multiple modes include image, writing, gesture, gaze, speech, and posture for meaning making across content areas. So multimodal instruction is extremely important for our multilingual learners because, you know, they create what I call message abundance. So different ways of presenting information for our multilingual students are really, really critical.
Okay, and that's definitely something I wanted to highlight, this idea of message abundance. I love that. I love those two words together because it's so much of what communication is about, right? It's about being able to have an abundance of ways to express whatever it is, whatever message you are trying to bring across, right? Now, I did have a question because you said gaze, you mentioned gaze. Can you just kind of expand on that idea a little bit more when you talk about multimodal ways of learning?
Yes, absolutely. So that's one area that sometimes people forget that it's just so important to think about, like, how you use your eyes, how you are looking at things. And it's not just about the gestures that you're making, but, you know, eye contact, how you are providing, you know, information to students and how they are, you know, looking at you, and also so that's also part of meaning making.
Yes.
So gaze is something that, yeah, people maybe don't think too much about when we talk about multimodal instruction, but gaze is also a really critical component of multimodal instruction.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes me back to that phrase that the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? So, you know, they are a very important part of our communicative repertoires, I guess I'll say. So,
Exactly.
so speaking of these different repertoires, right? You know, you definitely mention using students' home languages as resources, or rather taking advantage of students' linguistic repertoires. So what are some ways that you would say that teachers can do this?
Yes, so this is actually something that I discuss in more depth in both of the books that I mentioned, in the LACI book and also the Elements book that I just mentioned. I think that there are still many misconceptions in the TESOL field about using students' home languages in the classroom. But so much work on, for example, translanguaging has shown the importance for multilingual learners to be able to to use their entire linguistic repertoires in the classroom. And teachers really need to move away from the notion that in an English as an additional language classroom, only English needs to be used. I think this was guidance that we received many, many years ago in academic programs, but we really have moved away from that. And, like using students' home languages in the classroom is seen as something not only, important, but crucial, critical for them, to be able to use all of their meaning-making resources, everything that they have available. And so it's really, really a very important point. And it's part of, in the LACI framework, it's both part of the C of culture and the C of code breaking. Because using students' home languages and having students use their home languages with each other as well is a major part of code breaking. It's really helping them to, learn more from their languages, draw from their languages, and to learn English, and vice versa. So, and it's, of course, a major part of the C of culture as well.
Okay, and I'm just curious whether you think that this initial push towards English only in classes had a lot to do with the notion of the native English speaker who often may not even really be familiar with their students' mother tongues as, being seen as kind of king or queen of English language teaching. Do you think that that kind of was kind of the push part of the reason why there was this push towards English only?
I think that that's part of it. We know now that, of course, this notion of native English speakers is dead, though it's still very much used, in books. When you talk to publishers, there's a major emphasis, like I think all over the world, really, for, quote, native English speakers as role models of English. And so we have pushed against that for a number of years in both the TESOL professional organization and also the TESOL field. I was actually one of the first scholars to focus on, quote, non-native English speaking teachers as role models for our students. And so that could be the topic for another podcast, because that is a lot of information on that and a lot of work done in this area, and such interesting work. But I do feel that that's very much connected to that. And also the notion that immersion in English and speaking English only is what is best for our multilingual learners. So this was something, again, many, many years ago, but we know that that does not hold true in our multilingual classrooms today. We know that using students' entire linguistic repertoires in the classroom really is what we need to do, and we need to be able to draw from as teachers.
Okay, so I'm going to step away a little bit from what we've been discussing in terms of the book, the content of the book, et cetera. And, I did a little bit of a deep dive, and I saw that you are involved with this project called Racial Equity 2030, and you're a member of the expert review panel of this. Can you tell me a little bit more about maybe the project and your involvement in this? Because it sounds just really fascinating.
So this was a few years back. I was a reviewer for this racial equity project funded by the Kellogg Foundation. I think that's the one that you were talking about.
Yes.
Yes. So I reviewed applications from, I can't tell, much more than what is available, on the website
Yeah.
by the Kellogg Foundation, but those of us who were invited to be reviewers reviewed applications from all over the world, and they involved not only language, but things like how you improve the environment in developing countries, and lots of things that I wasn't too familiar with. But it was just an amazing opportunity to be one of the reviewers for the Racial Equity 2030 projects.
Okay. All right. Great. A lot of our educators wear many different hats and are involved in a lot of different interesting projects, etc. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So before we kind of wrap up today, I definitely would like you to share with our listeners where people can find information about your work, maybe any upcoming projects that you have or publications that you would like to make us aware of, because I know that you definitely stay super busy and do like so much writing in this field, and so we really want to be able to keep up with what's coming up next for you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yes, so I'm actually continuing my work with the New York City Department of Education, the Division of Multilingual Learners. I've been working with them for 5 years. It's a collaboration between the Division of Multilingual Learners and the Department of Social Studies. This past year, we were working with teachers in the Bronx, focusing on civics, and they implemented LACI as part of take action projects that students actually developed. And we had a museum fair about a couple weeks ago on June 7th, which was in the Bronx. And I'm going to be continuing this work with the Division of Multilingual Learners next year, going into our 6th year, and really focusing on LACI, implementing LACI in social studies. And I'm currently working on a couple of publications with my main collaborator, Maria Fridland, from the Division of Multilingual Learners. And we're hoping to come to NICE TESOL in November. Again, I was there last November presenting with her, and hopefully again this coming November at NICE TESOL. And so maybe I'll see some of the folks who are interested in this podcast there. So really, continuing that work has been amazing. And so that's definitely one of the projects that I have going on for next year. And I will be working in Colorado as well next year, focusing on pull out English language development and how LACI can be implemented in a pull-out ELD setting, which is very different from the work that I have done for the past several years, but they're really excited about that context. And we're focusing on 3 main C's, not all 6 C's, but 3 main C's that are especially important for English language teachers. And so I'm excited about that project coming up next year, and hopefully I'll have some interesting work coming out of that in the following years. And so those are my 2 main projects, I think, for the coming years that I definitely want to continue to do with New York City DOE, and also now with Colorado.
Okay, I'm super curious to understand which 3 C's you're going to be focusing on.
We're going to be focusing on connection, culture, and especially code breaking.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So these first 3,
those
fantastic.
are the 3 C's that we are going to be focusing on.
Okay. All right. So, and now it's time for the final question that I like to ask all of my guests here. So, what burning question should today's educators consider in order to improve their service to the L community?
Can you repeat the question?
What burning question should today's educators consider in order to improve their service to the L community?
burning question? Um, I think what is it's really important for all educators is to consider how they're making their classrooms high challenge, high support. So I want to bring us back to the C of challenge, because it seems to me that it's still something that our educators, especially those who are in the TESOL field, are grappling with. So I feel like this is still an issue that is lingering, and it's something that we need to continue to think about and to do for our multilingual learners. How do we provide high challenge, high support classrooms so that our multilingual learners are seen as capable, as, students who have a lot to contribute, and that are just amazing, instead of seeing them from a deficit perspective as individuals who, quote, don't have something like the English language proficiency. Instead, seeing them as really the amazing individuals that they are, who come with amazing cultures, amazing language experiences and backgrounds that we should really draw from in our classrooms.
Yes. Okay. All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Luciana de Oliveira. We're so happy that you were able to join us today, and we will definitely be looking forward to seeing the kind of the fruits of all of these wonderful projects and these publications that you are currently working on.
Thank you so much again for the invitation, and it was wonderful to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to Our Burning Questions, produced by Mid-State Auburn at OCM BOCES. If you would like to learn more about today's guest or any of the resources we discussed, please visit Mid-State Auburn's webpage at ocmboces.org. That's ocmboces.org. Join us next time, where we hope to answer more of your burning questions.